start by thanking the judges of the Lillian Smith Books Award, also for highlighting my Monticello, and also the Southern Regional Council, the University of Georgia Libraries, DeKalb County Public Library, love the libraries, the Georgia Center for the Book, and Piedmont College, and anyone else who made this award, who makes this award possible every year. It's really an honor to be recognized for writing about the American South, especially in a way that carries on Lillian Smith's legacy. And by that, I mean shining a light on racial and social inequity and proposing a vision of justice. Smith's example is needed as much today as ever. And what I mean by that is it highlights that all of us, whatever our identities, should and must advocate for social justice, racial equity, and revolutionary environmental reform. So all the stories in my debut collection are set in Virginia, and they center Brown and Black people who are thinking about home and longing and belonging. And since this is a work of fiction, I'm going to read a short bit from the inaugural story in this collection. This is a collection of short stories, and the first story is called Control Negro, and it's my dad's favorite. This is a story of a Black professor named Cornelius Adams, and I say that he's a Frankenstein-like father because he's running a secret social experiment on his only son in order to test America's promise. He wants to see if, given the right conditions, if his son is smart enough, decent enough, composed enough, will his son not only be spared racist violence, but will he also have access to life and to liberty? So I'm going to read just a page or two from Control Negro towards the middle. This story takes the form of a letter, so father writing to son. Everyone has an origin story, and this is yours. You began as a thought fully formed and sprung from my head. No, you were more like a determined line of questions, marching all together toward a momentous thrashing. It was 1985, years before you were born, and I'd just come to work here on this campus. Mother died at the start of fall semester, her body inundated with cancer, undiagnosed until she had passed. Numb, I traveled south to bury her, missing the initiation of my own first classes, returning as promptly as I could. I was only away for a week and a day, but a cold snap had scattered leaves onto the great lawn. My first afternoon back, I walked over to my office and was straightening the objects of my desk, my shirt sleeves rolled up, my back to the door. A man walked in, and he startled when I turned to face him, so I startled too. He was, I learned a few minutes later, a senior colleague from my own department, history. He'd been away on sabbatical and come to my office to welcome me. Sorry, he said, I'm looking for Professor Adams. Do you know where I can find him, buddy? I realized what was happening a moment before he did and forced myself to laugh, to try to put him at ease, though I fear my laughter came out a strangled sound. You see, he'd mistaken me for one of the evening janitors. But then, the next week, I stood before all my bright young students. For the first time in a long time, I felt, if not settled, then at least situated. Soon after, in a morning seminar, I remember feeling hopeful as I collected an early set of in-class writings. Our topic, 19th century thinkers. I discovered a hand-drawn cartoon among the shuffle, no name in the corner. Passed in on purpose or by accident, it was hard to tell which. It was nothing really, just a single frame of itchy graphite titled Irony. Within its borders, a history professor leaned over a lectern, looking quite like me, same jacket and bow tie, except with something primitive about his face. A thought bubble hovered over the room of students. Darwin taught to men by an ape. It's nothing, I told myself as I walked back to my apartment that evening, though in truth I felt tired. What does it matter? I remember thinking. What does it matter how much I achieve, or how clearly I speak, or how carefully I conduct myself, if the brutal misjudgments remain regardless? What if even here they cannot bring themselves to see me and instead see something oblique reflected where I thought I stood? Mother used to tell me, work hard, Cornelius, work twice as hard and you can have something. But there I was, a grown man, wondering what it was I could have and what would be forever withheld. What I needed, it occurred to me then, was to watch another man's life unfold. A Black boy, not unlike me, but better than me, an African American who was otherwise equivalent to those broods of average American Caucasian males who scudded through my classrooms. ACMs, I came to call them, and I wondered how they would measure up with this flawless young man as a watermark. No, it wasn't them exactly. I wanted to test my own beloved country. Given the right conditions, could America extend her promise of life and liberty to me too, to someone like me? What I needed was a control Negro. And given what I teach, it wasn't lost on me, the agitation of those two words linked together, that archaic descriptor clanking off the end like a rusted shackle. Those words struck in me, and from them you grew. So I'm going to talk a little bit more and then I'll end with one more reading. I heard somewhere that this collection, My Monticello, is the first fiction selection to win the Lillian Smith Award in some time, which is, again, a huge honor. To my mind, fiction can play a really important part in shaping the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, what we mean to one another, and about our responsibility to our ailing home planet. Some fiction lets us ponder the realities of the past so that we, as readers, can feel the past in our own bodies. Some fiction can expand our view and offer possibilities of the future. I was thinking about both the past and the future when I wrote the titular novella, My Monticello, which takes up the biggest part of this collection. I started to write the novella about 1 year after the Unite the Right March, which took place in Charlottesville, Virginia, where I live. And this was years before the January 6th storming of the Capitol. This was back in 2017. The Unite the Right rally was ostensibly a protest against our town's decision to remove a Confederate statue. But as many of you may remember, on August 11th and 12th of 2017, these Unite the Right protesters poured into our relatively small town carrying torches that were reminiscent of a fearsome time of violence towards Black people in this country, carrying banners with swastikas on them and machine guns. On Friday night, a group of protesters circled the Thomas Jefferson statue on the University of Virginia and fought with students who opposed them there. On Saturday morning, they spilled onto our downtown pedestrian mall, passing shops and restaurants that I knew well, chanting, "Jews will not replace us," and "into the ovens." Counter-protesters showed up too, people who opposed Unite the Right's message of genocide and white supremacy. Some people in the two opposing groups bloodied and pepper sprayed one another, while police stood stone-faced, seeming only to guard storefronts. As you may know, one man violently sped his car into a group of counter-protesters, killing one young woman, Heather Heyer, and battering many others. In the days and weeks that followed this protest, I couldn't help but ask myself, what does it mean that this just happened here in Charlottesville, here in Virginia? And how should I, as a Black woman, as a mother, as my nerdy arty art teacher self, how should I respond? I responded in part by writing the novella My Monticello. In the novella, I wrote the novella in part as a cautionary tale. In it, I tried to imagine what the future might look like if the kind of anger and entitlement we saw in Charlottesville went unchecked. My Monticello is a story of social and environmental unraveling. In it, a band of men with torches and guns attack a mostly Black, mostly low-income neighborhood, forcing neighbors to flee. One group takes refuge just outside of town at Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's pristine plantation home turned tourist site, led by Denasia Love, a local and UVA student. Nasia and her grandmother are imagined Black descendants of Thomas Jefferson and an enslaved woman, Sally Hemings, with whom Jefferson had 6 children. While taking refuge at Monticello, Denasia is forced to confront the troubled past. And in the story, I tried to explore some of the harm of racism and racial hate, but also imagine responses to it. For Nasia and her neighbors, there are no easy answers. Still, they oppose the men who set fire to their homes by binding themselves to one another in community. One hope I have in sharing this book is to invite us to think about the past and present in relation to the future. I've come strongly to believe that even massive systems of harm, like racism, are made up of a million small gestures that get codified into law and culture. And that part of defeating these same systems of harm will be in our gestures, the way we carry those values of equity and justice, not just on a banner, not only on a banner at a protest, but also into our day-to-day choices. In this way, you make my future and I make yours, and for good or for ill. And together we are right now making the future. I'm going to end with another reading from the beginning of the novella, My Monticello, and thanks in advance for listening. I hope you enjoy it and check out these stories. My Monticello. We claimed it first, this little mountain, me and Ma Violet and a scattering of neighbors, all of us fleeing First Street after men came to set our row of 10-roofed homes on fire. The men came at dusk, blaring an operatic, "Oh, say, can you see?" White heads rose up from dusty jeeps, and dark hair thrashed in a harsh new wind like tattered flags. "Ours," the men shouted. Their rifles gleamed as if they'd only just been bought, a megastore militia. Through a hasty breach in my Violet's blinds, I even saw a boy among them, blonde and sneering in a pickup window. Men leapt from back seats, sprang out of truck beds and rushed towards the faces of our homes. White hands clutched metal canisters, swung torches, spilling flames. Bright shouts, the rising haze of smoke, all that and more rousted us out. From our patchy front yards, we saw bodies blur as some of our neighbors charged forward to try to stop them. We saw a teen struck with the butt of a rifle, his temple spraying red. A toddler flailed, diapered and clinging to its mother's hip as she sank knees first to the sidewalk. What we saw in those moments riveted us, and then it set us free. No plan of where to go until my eyes landed on the short jaunt bus parked along First, cloaked in its skin of stars and stripes. Ma Violet used to ride those small city buses, which cater to seniors and folks with disabilities. This particular jaunt had sat out front for weeks, abandoned like so many vehicles ever since the grid went down. A break in the roaring line of Jeeps, and Knox and I ran toward it, tugging Ma Violet between us, still in her pale housecoat and slippers. Behind us, I saw Devin sprint out from between two buildings, metal shining in his mouth and on his hip. His twin cousins followed, the three of them gesturing wildly, drawing the armed men's attention. When we reached the jaunt, Ma Violet lurched to the top step, collapsing into an empty front seat. I slid in beneath the steering column where, by grace, keys dangled. Inside, a group of neighbors huddled along the brief aisle, their voices flowing toward us in recognition. A hush fell when Knox crested the landing behind me, my college boyfriend, tall and white, wearing wire-rimmed glasses. My eyes hung on him too for a fraction of a moment, with me wondering rashly, why is it we love what we love? Those men with guns must have seen our shadows in the jaunt bus window. A burst like fireworks, a jagged brightness, then I heard a known voice shouting, "Go, go, go." It was Devin's voice. He and the twins had shot back at the men as they made their way to us. They jumped onto the bus, and I stomped on the gas, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my palms ached for days. We did not so much peel off of First Street as fly away. That was the night we came and claimed this place, if not first exactly, then first since this dark new unraveling, when everything's been set free again, the way I see it. Not to mention our original due, denied, dismissed, but still there teeming in our blood, at least in Ma Violet's and in mine. So I'm going to end there. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you again for highlighting